The presentation that I'd like to present to you today is regarding school counseling and transgender youth. So to start off, I wanted to take a look at some pictures real quick and take a look. When you see these photos, one of the things about transgender students that we're going to encounter as counselors is that it may not be as easy for us to identify students who are questioning their gender identity or students who are in the process of transitioning as we might have thought. I wanted to show you some quick examples here. For example, this is Amaya Scott, who is a US transgender model. She's also a makeup artist, and she actually started transitioning at the age of 17. Here we have Balkan Bushbaum, who was born as Yvonne, was actually a German pole vaulter and was at one point ranked the second best in the world. In 2007, she retired from the sport, and the year following transitioned. And here we have Ryan Salins, who was born as Kimberly Ann, who transitioned in 2005. And is now an LGBT rights advocate and is actually gives presentations to different organizations in regards to transgender issues. But looking at these pictures, if you were to run into this man on the street, you probably wouldn't know. The same thing in our schools and in our classrooms is that students who are either already transitioned in high school or in the process of transitioning are dealing with a lot of different issues. So let's classify what is transgender. Transgender is a classification used to describe people whose self-identification or expression transgresses established gender categories or boundaries. Transgender is very much involved with what we talk about as gender dysphoria, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. The issues facing transgender youth, there are plenty of them. The number one issue that most counselors will have to deal with is issues regarding suicide. We're going to talk about suicide rates in just a moment, but that is the number one issue facing transgendered youth. Safety. Their safety is of great concern to us. We need to make sure that they understand that they have a safe place at school and that there are systems in place to ensure their safety. Another issue that they have to deal with is their own gender identity, the acceptance factor. I put passing on here because that's a term that's used in terms of how well or not well in some cases students are displaying their given gender identity. Privacy is another very large concern, and their dropout in education. A student's classification as transgendered is considered to be private information, and school counselors and teachers and staff need to treat that information as such, just as we would with any other issue, whether it was 504 or IEP status. In 1984, the Equal Access Act compelled federally funded secondary schools to provide equal access to extracurricular clubs. For example, if there's a student who is coming to you as a transgender student saying that they would like to start a GSA or a gay straight alliance, that is considered privileged information. They are to be given the same rights as any other organization, whether it would be French club or a sports booster club. If you are in a federally funded school, we have to allow the students the same opportunity to meet outside of school. Also, as far as the passing issue, a lot of transgender students, when they begin to transition, will start to dress in the sex of their gender identity. And according to the National Center for Transgender Youth, students are allowed to dress according to their gender identity so long as it follows school guidelines. They have protections in this area, and they need to be aware of that. We mentioned suicide as one of the big things. There is not nearly enough research that has been done at this point in specific to transgender. There's a lot of research involving the LGB, the lesbian, gay, or bisexual population, but there's not a lot of research that has been done in regards to simply transgender youth. They are, in fact, at a higher risk for suicide. According to some research that was done by the Williams Institute, 40% of transgender people will attempt suicide. That is more than double the LGB community, and that is more than triple of the general population. And in fact, there was a research study that said that that number of 40% went up to 60% for transgender youth who went to receive health advice or go visit a doctor and were not given treatment. That 40% increased to almost 60%. This is the chart that came just a lifetime suicide attempt. You can see that males from birth who transitioned had a 38% suicide risk attempt, and the females was at 44%. So we're averaging right around 40% for both male and female transgender. As students start to deal more with their gender dysphoria, and gender dysphoria is simply that, it's a strong and persistent discomfort with one's birth sex. Counselors are going to need more and more training to advocate for these students. Some facts that we need to be aware of for transgender and other LGBT youth. According to the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Networks, they did a report in 2008 on school climates, and 85% of transgender students reported being verbally harassed. 49% of them experienced some physical harassment, and 34% of them are reporting some type of physical assault. These assaults, this harassment is taking place in places like hallways, locker rooms, restrooms, going to and from school. Any place that's not considered heavily monitored is a space of risk and stress for these students. And I put a note here that also sometimes the students are not even the problem. Sometimes it's the faculty or the teachers that are creating that hostile environment. And in that very same study, 63% of LGBT students said that they have heard staff make homophobic remarks. This is something that needs to be addressed on a very large level. One thing that all counselors, I think, need to be aware of is that any school that receives Title IX funding from the federal government is bound by a federal law prohibiting sex discrimination in schools. Courts and federal agencies have concluded that discrimination or harassment because a person is transgender or gender nonconforming constitutes sex discrimination. Just so you're aware, Title IX applies to all schools, that is K through 12 and post-secondary, that accept federal funding, which is almost every public school. If a student is being harassed and we are doing nothing about it, they can file a complaint with the United States Department of Education. This could cause funding issues within your school. So we need to make sure if a student is reporting harassment that it needs to be documented and it needs to be addressed. So what can we do as counselors? How can we approach this and help students who are transgender find a safe place at school? First and foremost, it should be important to know that you might be the only person that student comes and talks to. You may be the only person that knows that they're even questioning their gender identity. So being supportive and offering them a safe environment to express their feelings, concerns, and worries about their gender identity. Be aware that their family may not know or be supportive of the student's transition. A lot of times students will question their gender identity or be thinking about it, but not have the voice to say it to anybody. And their counselor may be the one place that they feel protected enough to do so. And so you need to keep that information close to you. According to the Association for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Issues in Counseling, due to the heterosexism, trans prejudice, transphobia, and trans negativity many transgender individuals experience, it is not uncommon for transgender people to be rejected from their family of origin and therefore may be conflicted and or have separation from their nuclear or extended families. A lot of times students will feel like they have no one at home that they can talk to, or even if they did talk to them, that they may not be accepting of their issues. So the organization has set forth a series, in conjunction with the ASCA, has set forth a series of competencies for working with transgender clients. They go through and assess, address all these different issues of human growth and development, social and cultural foundations, the helping relationship, group work, professional orientation, career and lifestyle, appraisal and research. And I wanted to hit a few points of each one of these. I've attached the document here to be viewed in its entirety. And I've picked out some individual things on each one of these that I think should be mentioned in this presentation. So as far as human growth and development, it's important to affirm that transgender mental and medical health care. We need to be aware of the therapy and the process that they may be having to go through, because there's quite a bit involved. They need to be dealing with medical professionals, as well as making sure that they are mentally prepared for the transition that they may end up going through. Here we talk about understanding how gender conforming may affect their personal development and how it may affect their decisions regarding their employment, their healthcare, their housing decisions. That transgender students are not only dealing with internal issues, but they're also having to deal with a lot of external issues with how are they going to function in a world that is fearful of things that they are not understanding of. In terms of social and cultural foundations, the very first point in here, B1, understanding the importance of appropriate language, correct name and pronouns with transgender clients. We need to honor the client's definition of their own gender, and we need to respect and model that respect for how they define themselves, because they're already dealing with issues regards to identity. So by not acknowledging who they are and how they feel and how they see themselves, we are, in essence, that would be doing the opposite of what our role is as counselors. In terms of the helping relationship, we need to be aware of the counselor's gender identity. Our expressions, our concepts about gender are very much relevant to the helping relationship. We need to make sure that we are aware of how we are portraying ourselves so that we only create and foster a helping relationship with these students. C9 very much mentions what we said earlier. We want to create a welcoming and affirming environment, and our job is to respect the entire individual, not just the gender-related issues. We also need to look at providing education and opportunities for social learning about coming out or transitioning. Some students may know that they feel like the gender dysphoria is prevalent, that they know that there's something not right about how they feel day to day, but they may not know what are the next steps, what are the process that they need to go through, who do they need to get in touch with in order to get more information about where they feel most comfortable. The very bottom here, it says seek consultation or supervision to ensure that personal biases do not negatively affect the relationship. It's important that we as counselors are able to look at our own personal biases and understand if they are going to impact our client relationship on a professional level. We need to look outside of ourselves, or we need to refer that student or involve another person to be able to check ourselves and make sure that we are not doing damage, the do no harm idea. And finally, F1 here, assisting transgender clients with exploring career choices that best facilitate both identity formation and job satisfaction. It's important that these students realize that when they head out into the working world, that there's going to be companies that are going to be trans friendly, and there are companies that may not be trans friendly. And we want to make sure that we are clear with students about the idea of, if they're going to look for a job, say that you've got a senior in high school and they're going to go look for a job, and they're a trans student, and they're looking at a job at a company that you're well aware is not LGBT friendly. To be honest and upfront with these students, that they need to understand that they're either going to have to conform to something that may make them feel not as comfortable, but it's a job, and they're going to have to make some very hard choices, and our job is to assist them in choosing the thing that is best for them, for both things, for their identity and for a career or a job to earn enough money to put themselves through school. And that ties in here with F6, where we talk about demonstrating an awareness of a high degree of discrimination that transgenders have historically experienced in the workplace, and how this discrimination may affect other life areas, their housing, their self-esteem, their family support. The discrimination that transgender students experience is on a level that is not matched by any other minority group at this point. And they need to be aware of what's out there and how to handle it. So the impacts for academic achievement. Most importantly, transgender youth have reported transferring to more accepting public or even alternative schools known to have better environments for LGBT youth. Transgender youth are also at risk for academic difficulties, school absences due to harassment, and dropping out. These are two of the biggest things. Transgender students report almost 20% of the time not reporting, missing at least one day a week of school, just because of harassment at school. And transgender youth who experienced higher levels of harassment reported missing more school due to safety concerns. Like we said, lower grade point averages and fewer plans to attend college than transgendered youth who experience less harassment. I've included some resources for educators in South Carolina and nationwide. Here in South Carolina, the Harriet Hancock Center and the Palmetto Association. And nationwide, we have the Trans Equality group that has a brochure and some quick fact sheet information about how the rights of transgender students in schools. I hope you've enjoyed this and learned something. All of my references here at the top. Hopefully you've enjoyed learning something about transgender youth and understand that they are dealing with a lot more than just their own gender issues and their own self-understanding. These are clients who are dealing with almost abuse from every direction, and our job as counselors is to help protect them and help them find a way to navigate through a fairly tumultuous world.